Hey everybody, welcome. I guess not to another video review, but this is like an addendum to the Obi-Wan has first built lightsaber review I had earlier. So this is kind of a big deal, and I'd like to, immortalize it in a YouTube video so it'll always be out there for people in the future who, might have need of this information. If you recall, during my initial review of this piece, I pointed out the crack in the bubble strip on the clamp box. It's a very subtle imperfection, so that when you're like rotating it, and we take this acrylic case off, if you're just rotating it and looking at it from afar, you really can't see it at all. But if you look close enough, and you can definitely see the crack. So I wanted to follow up on that. Let's take a look at this. So I wanted to follow up on this because in the pursuit of perfection, we gain quite a bit of knowledge. So the bottom line is, let's lift this up, let's get this out of the way. So the bottom line here is that you see this little crack here. Again, it's really hard to tell because the light sort of glistens off of the bubble strip, but you can see the little line right here, right? And basically, if you want to replace it, you can't really fix this. See, so from this angle, you can see a little bit better. But then like from this angle, you can barely see it at all. But in any case, if you want to get rid of this, the way to do it is you have to actually replace the whole thing. And if you grab this and like it doesn't move at all, it's completely rock solid. It feels like it's just in there so tight. And so, one of my friends in the Master Replicas community circle, he was like, I wonder if there's a way to fix this. And I was like, well, this isn't exactly fixing a statue or restoring a fine porcelain work of art or statue. This is like literally like a lightsaber, you know what I mean? Like, how are they gonna be able to fix this? And he was like, well, I bet there's a way. And so just kind of, taking a cue from him, I posted up essentially like a want ad, both on the Master Replicas Facebook page, as well as the RPF, the Replica Prop Forum. I got some very helpful responses, but none so helpful as a guy named James Kenobi, I think 1138, and his username is very well matched. He basically dropped, and he was instrumental in solving this particular puzzle. And he said, yeah, he goes, you can do it. He said, what you have to do is you have to disassemble the clamp box here, okay? And it may look like it's impossible, but from the old days, when they were like disassembling these lightsabers all the time for spare parts, back when these hilts cost a few $100 each, he gave me the instructions, and he said, look, all you gotta do is to take this lever right here, and if you look really closely, you'll see that there's a hinge. Do you see that? There's a hinge right here. And that means that this hinge, let me try to look at it from this angle, you can see it here, right? You can see that this lever, even though it's laid down now flush against the clamp box, do you ever wonder how they attach this to the clamp box? It's rock solid. So what you're supposed to do is you take this hinge like so, okay? And then what you do is you literally open it and you rotate it out so it's 90 degrees. And once you rotate this thing all the way out, then you can actually unscrew it like so. So take this lever and then open it out and unscrew it. And once you unscrew the whole thing out, this side bar right here, the sidebar, it actually falls off. And the pin here actually can be loosened as well. Once I think the screw, the lever screw, so to speak, actually hooks up to this pin, and then when you unscrew everything out, it falls apart and both sidebars pop out. And on the inside of this clamp box, once the sidebar is removed, there's actually 2 screws on either side. I don't know whether they're Phillips screws or hexagonal screws, but in any case, you can easily find screwdrivers for those, and then you remove those or you loosen those. And when you loosen those 2 screws on the inside, then this entire clamp assembly also loosens, and then the bubble strip can easily be slid out, and you can put another bubble strip in. Now, of course, another bubble strip is easier said than done. They sell cheap ones, because how much is a bubble strip supposed to cost? There's a site called Wanga that makes extraordinarily accurate bubble strips, accurate to the exact Texas Instruments Exactra bubble strips that was used in the original creation of the Obi-Wan and Luke Star Wars New Hope hilts. But unfortunately, getting those is not a perfect solution. I mean, if you put it in this clamp box, I would say like 99 out of 100 people wouldn't even notice, because it just looks on the surface essentially perfect. But the Wanga ones, or the true replica ones, are so accurate that it's actually a little bit narrower than the Master Replicas version. And so it's actually that Master Replicas is a bit more inaccurate, but getting the more accurate version is technically, it's not quite the same. And if you want to repair this and replace this bubble strip with a perfect replacement, literally the same bubble strip they use in these hilts, then the only way to do that is actually to take the bubble strip from a Luke Skywalker, Star Wars New Hope, Luke Skywalker saber, and transplant it, because those are actually the same bubble strips that they used for the Obi-Wan's first build. And it doesn't matter, obviously, which Luke Skywalker New Hope lightsaber you use, but signature editions are going for 3,000 on up, elite editions over 2,000, and the limited editions maybe 1,500, 1,000 to 1,500, depending on what you do. So it probably makes more sense than to just get the limited edition, but even that's going to set you back over $1,000 minimum, more likely 1,500, which is kind of crazy, kind of pricey. You can't use the Obi-Wan weathered version because it's actually discolored because it's weathered. And so those are your options, quite limited. And I was considering maybe doing that. But before doing that, he gave me a lot of advice about properly, masking this off and making sure, you don't accidentally scratch it, being careful. And he talked about how it's really hard to unscrew it. It's like being so tight, and you might actually have to use a wrench or something to force it out. So I decided, before I do all of that, for instance, before I do it to a Jedi lightsaber hilt, I should probably just test it out. And just see, because he said that the Jedi Luke, not the Jedi Luke, the Star Wars New Hope Luke, he said that was really hard to do, mainly because they didn't want you to do that, and so they actually kind of put a little glue in the threads of the internal screw to lock it in. But they did that with the Luke Skywalker New Hope hilts, but this was made in 2002, right? It's so 4 years earlier. I don't think they did that. So he said, if you just are able to open the lever and then just kind of gently twist, you should be able to unscrew this, no problem. Once you unscrew this, everything else should be child's play, all right? So anyways, I tried to kind of go ahead and do this, and I'll do it for you live. So you're supposed to grab the tail end, and it's supposed to come right out, and it is impossible to move. I would sooner bend here. I think I would bend this off. I would actually damage this and bend it, rather than get this thing out. And I don't actually know how to even go ahead and do this, because it's so tight. I feel like if I try to do it anymore, it may actually literally break this thing here as well, okay? And I think technically what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to actually take a jeweler's pliers or something that's where the the metal is protected with, foam or plastic that won't scratch the metal here. And you're supposed to grab it and again, try to gently cantilever it out. It's going to require a tremendous amount of like force, okay? Not the force, but force, like real force, guys, to do that. And so I was a little bit intimidated by this. And this was not something that the guy kind of told me was necessary. He said you might need a wrench or jeweler's pliers to do the unscrewing, but he never mentioned any type of aid to just simply bring this lever out. And so I messaged him, I was like, dude, has this been an issue with you? And then he kind of gave this huge like light bulb on moment or answer. He said, I don't have Obi-Wan lightsaber. I did this teardown with my Luke Skywalker New Hope lightsaber, but it's the same clamp box, the same bubble strip, the same lever, same everything. And he's like, the reason that this is impossible to open up could be that when they made this lightsaber, they basically twisted it way too much. Maybe 2, 3, 4 turns over what it should have done. And then when you twist it too hard and then you basically, close the lever and push it down against the clamp box, and you do that, you basically lock it in and make it incredibly hard to remove, okay? And then he said, you know what? I bet that's the reason why the bubble strip got cracked, because they turned this thing so hard, and then when they finally, closed the lever and forced it down, that was probably a heck of a lot of pressure, and that probably led to the bubble strip cracking. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty damn mind-blowing, okay? Because if you'll recall, both this hilt and the hilt that a gentleman was selling, I think on the East Coast, but he was in the United States, they both had that line. And we were thinking about like what could have caused that, because people who buy like an Obi-Wan as first build, they're not cosplaying with this on. I mean, this is like a very treasured replica for them. And they both swore that they, bought it, put it in their display case, and just basically just didn't even touch it for 20 years. Been a part of their collections for like decades. Why would there be a damage to the bubble strip? This crack is usually caused by significant impact, and there was never any impact among the adult collectors of these blades, of these hilts. And it's also fascinating that the crack almost always is between the third and the fourth bubbles and is in a slight angle, a slant. Well, now with this information from the RPF, from James Kenobi, the answer becomes evident. When you screw this tight and then you basically close the lever against the clamp box, there's incredible pressure here. And maybe when you first bought it and got it in your collection, it was fine. But this bubble strip is just plastic. And under that much pressure over that many years, absolutely, it could slowly begin to crack. And where is it going to crack? It's going to crack starting with the greatest force, and look at where the screw is tightened super hard, and it's right where the crack starts in the middle. You see that? So basically this right here is where the greatest amount of pressure is from this lever screw, and over time the plastic inevitably cracks. And just to confirm, in that very thread, another collector actually read it, and he says, let me check. He says, hey, you know what? I own a Obi-Wan as first build as well. Let me check it out. He goes and fishes it out, checks it out. He takes a picture, and guess what? His bubble strip has the same crack in the same location, identical orientation. It was insane. In fact, when I took a picture of that and sent it to my friend in the United Kingdom who sold me his, he at first thought that it was a picture of his lightsaber. That was how essentially identical this crack was, okay? And so at that point, we now have the following facts. We have 3 Obi-Wan as first built hilts, all with essentially the exact same crack in the exact same position, exact same angle. And what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that we have now solved the mystery of how the damage came to be. Obviously, when they, created these in the factory, the production run, they were told how to put it together. And I wonder if a person actually manually did it. I doubt that they did. It would be kind of insane if they did do that. I mean, it's not beyond, possibility, but they must have had like these instructions, and you have to turn it a certain number of times, and then you close the lever. And so I bet every single Obi-Wan Kenobi as first built saber had this over tightening problem. And I can't imagine any plastic bubble strip surviving that much pressure over 20 years. So what I'm trying to say is we got 3 with the same crack, and I would be willing to wager a pretty good amount of money that every single Obi-Wan as first built today, if you were to dig it up and look, I bet it would have that crack. Because how could it not? I mean, it's one thing if these things were built by different people in the factories, and maybe you just got an unlucky one where the guy just went a little bit too crazy and over screwed, over tightened, and then you had this. But why then, I mean, what are the chances that 3 completely separate collectors from different parts of the world would all have the same thing? There is a certain, consistency to this. And so my guess is that, maybe part of the process of building these lightsabers was done like, automated, like, like a car assembly plant or whatever. And a machine just kind of, boom, and just kind of twisted it. And maybe another machine just pushed it. So maybe part of it was built, by automation. Or if a human being was the one who actually, put this together, then maybe there was very strict instructions on how many turns you have to tighten and when. But the bottom line is, I no longer see this as a easy defect or imperfection, because I do believe now that this is actually the new normal because of the mistake of what Master Replicas decided to do to keep this thing so tight it doesn't move at all. They essentially created a situation where damage at this level was inescapable. Okay. And so ironically, if you have a real Obi-Wan as first built, there better be a crack in the bubble strip, because if there isn't, then that means that they actually took the time to open this and replace it. Which, by the way, is not necessarily a bad thing, that they might have replaced it with something better, but it's no longer quote unquote original material from the Master Replicas original release. Okay. So I hope you found that kind of interesting. I think it's just really cool that even 21 years later, there could be mysteries like these. And by going back and talking to people who are so knowledgeable, and who used to take these things apart for fun and profit all those decades ago, that they're still around, they're still helpful. Different collectors who own this incredibly rare hilt was able to step up and take a look at theirs. And I'm curious if any of you out there also own a Master Replicas Obi-Wan as first built, check it out, and then get back to me. Leave a comment down there. Leave a little note in the comments and let me know if you have that crack. I bet you do, and it's a very small, subtle one, and you would never notice unless you were absolutely looking for it. And I think if you actually look at the clamp, or you look at the lever, can't you tell that this lever is not perfectly horizontal? That's the funny thing. This lever isn't level, get it? It's a little bit down. And again, that means that they had, twisted a little bit extra and then layered it flat, okay, and then closed it. So it kind of shows you it's not quite perfect, And again, it's really, really hard for me to imagine a real as first built lightsaber with this much tension without a crack after 20 years. Maybe it's out there, but you have to prove it to me first and let me know. So I know it's a long shot because there's just not that many of these out there, but if there is, I would love to hear from you to see if you found this to be the case. So I'm going to put this back. And again, because of this new information, I'm frankly no longer that motivated to try to replace it, mainly because I don't know what machine was used to get this into position or what force was used to get this into position, but it's a lot. And I don't have any confidence in my ability to actually force that lever open without permanently damaging it in some respect. And since all of this would be in the service of trying to, repair a bubble strip that now is in my opinion, again, become the new normal. For me, at least, I don't feel like the juice, quite simply, is worth a squeeze in terms of the risk. I'm quite happy to keep this as is and go from there. I may be curious to take out my, when I do a review maybe for the Luke Skywalker, I might try to see if it's easier. I think it's very suggestive, by the way, that there's never been any damage or crack to the Luke Skywalker, and they made so many of those. They made literally thousands of those, limited edition version, signature edition version, and elite edition, and not in any of those has there ever been a cracked bubble strip, which means, again, that tells me that it was not overly tightened. They were maybe trying to use the glue in the thread to discourage disassembly. But for the Obi-Wan, they definitely over-tightened because of that. So that's it, really, the mystery of this solved. And now we know, and I love actually, again, I love situations where we do the detective work, we, use our heads, and then we come up with an answer that is, eminently reasonable, and it kind of guides you. So in the future, for those of you trying to sell this, obviously, I bet my friend would have loved to find out about that because it's very compelling. And it should not then be, again, it should not be taken to devalue the saber, because how can it be devalued when you can never find another one that's good? Like, no, there is no Obi-Wan as first built with a non-cracked bubble strip. Or if there is, there's maybe 5%, 10%, maybe there's 5, 7, 8 of these out of 500 that maybe doesn't have it. But again, when you understand that there's likely consistency in how they make these at the factories, and we understand how much pressure is in that screw, and that screw is tightened so hard, I just can't see any one of these making it without a crack. It seems impossible. Okay. So there you go. Thanks for paying attention throughout the whole video. I hope that this that you find it useful, and that in the future, if this ever becomes an issue or comes up, that we do have at least this video on YouTube that clearly states what is going on with that bubble strip and that clamp box, how to fix it if you've got the balls, if you've got the the guts, so to speak, to do it, and why, at least for me, I've decided it's just simply not worth doing that. Now that I understand what's involved in fixing it, and also why the initial damage happened in the first place. All right, until next time, do take care.